Hi. So I've noticed that whenever I search books for musicians or songwriters, books that are meant to help us stay motivated or focused on our craft, I usually get results for self-help books or books on the music business. And while these are important to some extent, I don't think they're very important for helping you finish creative ideas. You can't really have a music business without finishing your creative ideas. In my last video, I mentioned that books have been a heavier inspiration for my second album than I actually got from listening to other music. That's not to say I don't have musical influences, but I noticed the most inspirational quotes and bits of information that actually helped me finish my project to begin with came from either philosophical or fictional stories. Not every book on this list is meant for musicians specifically. I still found them pretty valuable with my process and helping me understand the importance of solitude and being alone with your thoughts, present with your emotions, and understanding what your music is actually asking of you. That being said, I wanted to give you 5 books that help me stay focused, inspired, enjoy my alone time, and finish my second album. The first book is a pretty quick read. I think a lot of people could get through this in a day. Not that you need to, but it's just a really fast-paced read. I noticed on Amazon that the description said that Lady Gaga found a lot of inspiration in this book. Letters to a Young Poet is exactly what it sounds like. It's a collection of letters from Rainer giving some very sound advice to an aspiring writer about the importance of solitude and being alone with your thoughts and feelings, and the sort of tension that all of that can bring to you, especially when it's not even music. I feel like a lot of hard work isn't guaranteed reward. Fairness doesn't necessarily exist in the music industry. I think things would be operating in a very different way if that were the case. But that shouldn't stop you from being able to make work that reflects you and resonates with you and speaks to your spirit in that given moment. I think this is a fantastic book that helps you sort of understand the gentleness that you need to give yourself to finish more meaningful art. I could go into why the creative process has to be a transformative one, but one of my favorite lines from this book is, "You must think that something is happening with you. Life has not forgotten you. It holds you in its hand and it will not let you fall. Why would you want to exclude unsettling pain, depression of spirit, when you don't know what work it is these states are performing on you? You are in a transition period and want nothing more than to be transformed." Of course, there's plenty of nuance to that about like the limitation that we should set, or like boundaries around suffering and like people's circumstances. Yeah, we could talk about that all day. But I think just for the sake of being able to sit down and enjoy making art, it requires not necessarily pain, but just being okay with solitude, with silence, with being alone with your thoughts and emotions, and the kind of tension that it brings up within you. It's important to question like why your mind goes there. Why does your heart constantly bring you back to this feeling? Usually there's a lot of fun creative work to find in exploring that, and that's why I think this book is pretty sweet. Although the timeline in the beginning is odd. I don't think Rainer doesn't sound like he was a very good dad. Next up, I have Kusamakura by Natsume Soseki. I did mention this book in my last video, but I wanted to go into more depth with it. Something that stood out to me immediately is that Natsume, in the introduction, mentions that he grew up in a life of education, but was very isolated, which I can relate to a lot. He was also growing up in a time period where Japan was starting to immerse itself in the outside world. It wasn't being so isolated. It was starting to embrace Western culture and ideas and art. And you can tell pretty explicitly that he's not very down with it. There's aspects of Western culture that he is inspired by, but for the most part, he's pretty critical of these two worlds blending together. So the premise of this book is that it follows a traveling artist around the mountains, and he's on a mission to paint a beautiful woman. The main thing that I loved about this book is its ability to pull the Taoist perspective into play and into focus. And I'd say that it presents some of the same points that Rainer does in Letters to a Young Poet, but it does it in such a romantic, beautiful way. It's so well written, and I can only imagine how much better it is in Japanese because it is a translation. The artist suggests that the difficulties that you face and your emotions that you come across are all really valuable. They're all so important and are meant to be observed and captured, and that you should just be gentle with yourself in the process, because the more you try to control these things, the harder it is to create art in the moment. This next one is not related to musicians whatsoever, but it is easily in my top 3 books that I've read in a very long time. Open Water by Caleb Nelson is a fictional love story about a young black man living in London. He's a photographer and he falls in love with a dancer from Ireland. And the book primarily follows their adventures together. It's so cute, it's very well written. But what stood out to me is that it's written from like your perspective, like you are the man. It lets you dive really deep, not just into the black experience, but into a sense of tension and confusion that you get from pursuing something that you desire so deeply, but don't know what the outcome will be like, especially if it brings you to a vulnerable place. If you obtaining what you desire means being seen and being felt and being understood, can you handle that? Number 4 on my list is the Consolation of Philosophy. It's the only philosophy book that I can think to recommend besides maybe the Tao Te Ching. I don't read a lot of philosophy, to be honest with you. I listen to a lot of lectures and video essays, but it might just be how things are written, but I don't particularly enjoy reading philosophy books, to be honest with you. So this book follows Boethius after he's imprisoned in Greece by the Senate, and he's basically just having a hallucination with Lady Philosophy. And although this has heavy Christian undertones, I don't agree with some of the theology in this, especially towards the end, but I feel like it has a lot of connections to a book like Kusamakura. And I'd say there's plenty of points in here that, even though it's not even directed at a musician, it's still guiding you towards insights that are really important when it comes to focusing on what is important and what is a true representation of you. Much like the other books, Boethius talks about not being attached to the illusions or ideas that the world has for you and who you are. But I think my favorite point in the entire book is actually how he talks about fame. When you think of your future fame, you think you are creating for yourself a kind of immortality. But if you think of the infinite recesses of eternity, you have little cause to take pleasure in any continuation of your name. It's giving existentialism. He goes on to say that the day will come that takes your fame as well, and a second death awaits you. The reason why this feels important to understand as a creative is that while it is great to have goals and set a specific standard for what you're trying to achieve, it can only go so far. It cannot get in the way of you being present with what the music requires of you. And fame is not in that equation. Fame doesn't bring you to a sense of enlightenment. If anything, it's a barrier to it. It can put you in a place where you're not even just being watched by other people, but you are watching yourself and guarding yourself in a way that can keep you from understanding your emotions and enjoying the process of art making in a way that helps you finish your ideas. I feel like everyone and their mom has spoken about or mentioned Rick Rubin's The Creative Act, and it's probably the only book in here that is the closest to actual self-help. I do think it is such a palatable approach to what you need to do for yourself as a musician. I've seen a lot of debate around this book and its validity or usefulness, and I'd argue that it's coming from either people that haven't read the book, people that don't like Rick Rubin, which you can't do anything about that, or it's from people that directly benefit from musicians not understanding the points that Rick is trying to make. Nothing in it is necessarily new or groundbreaking. If you read the Tao Te Ching or Be Here Now, or honestly like the first 3 books that I mentioned, you'd get a lot of the same messaging. But what I think is important is that Rick suggests creating a garden, basically treating your music discography like a garden. The best piece of advice from the book that helped me get from writing my ideas to mixing my own album in a matter of about 4 months was working in phases. So in December, I was collecting seeds. I was writing one or more songs every day, whether it be for OLAN or for my other side projects. I was just making sure that I sat down to work on music every single day, because it's like a muscle. You have to exercise it all the time. But Rick suggests from there that you should make relentless and ruthless cuts. Once you've made as much music as possible and you feel like you've made 2-3 times as much as you actually need for the project, you go back and start to cut out the fat and take away things that you don't think are necessary. Only keep the songs that you feel like you can't live without. Rick spends a lot of time discussing how you go from these seeds of ideas to transformation and refinement into being able to share it with the external world and being able to share it with other people. The whole point of the book is to make sure that the music you're sharing is reflective, it's honest, and nothing more than that. I think it's especially difficult to take in because living in Western culture sucks right now. Making money is really hard. Nothing is necessarily fair in any field, it seems like. But the only way to be able to focus enough and actually enjoy the art making process is to completely let go of the outcomes entirely. You can't be worried about your fame. You can't be worried about how other people are going to interpret the work. You can't be worried about the advice that other people are giving you unless you feel like it enriches your experience and the music. That's something that only you will know. I do think the book contradicts itself a lot, but making art is a contradiction a lot of the time. Sometimes things work, sometimes they don't. And it might not work a second time. Just because it worked the first time doesn't mean you can replicate the process. But Rick just presents a general roadmap to where just giving yourself as many chances, as many shots, as many ideas to choose from will help you get to the finish line. I have so many other books that I could recommend, but I think those are the first 5 that come to mind when I think of art making and what's helped me stay focused and excited about finishing an album. I plan on putting out a lot more videos in the coming weeks as I'm preparing to release my album. I wanted to use this YouTube channel to get a better understanding not only of myself, but of the relationship that I want to have with people that are giving me the time in the first place. If you want to support me in the channel, I've got merch and vinyl linked in the description along with all my music on whatever streaming platform you like to listen to. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.